What if I told you one man's last breath in Rome just triggered the final line of a prophecy that ends with the city itself in ashes? Would you keep scrolling, or find out what happens next? The bronze bells of St. Peter's tolled only once before falling silent, as though they too were stunned. The note hung over Rome like a breath caught in the throat, then dissolved into an uneasy hush that rolled across the Tiber and along the 7 fabled hills. Seconds later, phone screens everywhere glowed blood red with the same headline: Pope Francis, dead at 88. Some collapsed into prayer, others scrolled with trembling fingertips, and a smaller but growing crowd exchanged grim looks. Because in the hidden corners of Vatican lore, there is a prophecy, almost 900 years old, that ends exactly here. St. Malachy's parchment lists 112 mottos that appear to match every pope in order, and Francis is the last one on the page. Malachy doesn't give us a happy epilogue. He gives us a sentence as hard as hammered iron. After Peter the Roman, the city of 7 hills will fall, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. That single line has haunted monks, scholars, and conspiracy forums alike. Yet today, for the first time, it feels less like distant folklore and more like a countdown clock that just hit 0. Before we split open what the prophecy could mean and what might wait on the other side, click the subscribe button, ring the bell, and stay to the final frame. You'll want every piece of this puzzle, because somewhere between the ink of a medieval vision and the smoke of a modern conclave, the future of faith, and maybe of Rome itself, could be changing course. Picture 12th century Rome. Narrow streets reeking of lamp oil and whetstone, cardinals shuffling in crimson, and an Irish bishop named Malmhaetoch o Morgair, Latinized as Malachy, arriving on pilgrimage. Legend claims that while praying at St. John Lateran, he was struck by a trance so fierce he had to be carried away. When he awoke, he spoke of a procession of popes stretching to the world's last dawn. In his cell, he scratched 112 Latin mottos onto a strip of parchment, brief, almost riddle-like tags. From the half moon, flower of flowers, labor of the sun. The parchment then vanished into monastic strongboxes, only to resurface in 1595, when a Benedictine scholar published it during a contentious election. Critics immediately smelled a Renaissance hoax. The mottos up to 1590 read more like miniature biographies than vague omens, which conveniently made political kingmakers look prophetic. But here's the wrinkle. After 1590, the mottos become shorter, stranger, and, if anything, less useful for rigging conclaves. And yet they kept landing eerie bullseyes. Take John Paul the Reese, whose line "from the half moon" matched his election under a waxing half moon and his death barely won. Lunar cycle later. Or John Paul II, "from the labor of the sun," born during a solar eclipse and laid to rest as another eclipse darkened the Americas. Skeptics dismiss it as apophenia, the brain's itch to find patterns. Believers counter with one relentless question. If the first 111 clues can be bent into place, what do we do with number 112? The only motto written as a full sentence. It doesn't give us poetry, it gives us a verdict. And the verdict turns on 3 identifiers. The last pope will be number 112, he will bear the name Peter, and he will be Roman by origin or essence. For centuries, the scroll sat like a dormant ember. Then in 2013, white smoke curled above the Sistine Chapel, and cardinals introduced a man few expected. Suddenly, that ember blossomed into something hot enough to scorch marble. Jorge Mario Bergoglio never fit the storybook image of a European prince-pope. He grew up in the Flores barrio of Buenos Aires, where open-air markets mixed oregano with diesel fumes and kids played football against chip plaster walls. His father shoveled coal for the railways. His mother kept 4 siblings fed on a factory wage. Yet every evening the household sounded more Turin than tango. The Bergoglios were Piedmontese immigrants, Roman in blood if not in accent, fleeing Mussolini's iron fist. At family dinners, young Jorge heard tales of foggy valleys under the Alps, of grandparents who prayed in dialects older than the Italian Republic itself. Fast forward to 2013. After 5 inconclusive ballots, cardinals filed back under Michelangelo's ceiling once more. When the count was read, the name Bergoglio echoed like a muffled gasp. The Argentine had placed second 8 years earlier, but seemed happy to remain far from the catwalk, as he put it. Now the ring of the fisherman was his. Tradition called for a papal name. He answered at once. Francis. The choice stunned journalists. No pope had dared to take the name of the ragged Umbrian who patched leper wounds and preached to birds. Cameras flashed, commentators scrambled. Few recalled that St. Francis of Assisi's baptismal name was Giovanni di Pietro di Bernardone, John, son of Peter. The numeric lock clicked too. Count from Celestine II, elected 1143, and Francis is indeed the 112th successor. Even many agnostics shivered at the symmetry. Roman-blooded Peter named, if sideways, last on the ledger. But prophecy demands more than neat arithmetic. It asks for tribulation. That part of the script arrived sooner and harder than anyone guessed. From day one, Francis broke choreography. He skipped the gold-trimmed mozzetta, rode a Ford Focus, instead of a Mercedes, and paid his own hotel bill. Global press dubbed him the People's Pope, but inside certain marble corridors the grin tightened. Powerful men had spent decades building a fortress of protocol. This Jesuit from the global south was strolling right through the front gate. The first landmine was already ticking. Clerical abuse. Survivors had waited decades for a pope to weep with them. Francis didn't just cry. He convened tribunals, defrocked cardinals once considered untouchable, and rewired Vatican finances so hush-money slush funds dried up. Every reform nicked another nerve ending in the Curia. Anonymous memos accused him of smearing the church's reputation. Victims argued he hadn't gone nearly far enough. Beyond Rome, the 2010s felt apocalyptic. Islamic extremists bulldozed. Monasteries older than Columbus. Migrant caravans, some Christian, some Muslim, staggered toward closed European borders. Francis flew to Lampedusa with a wreath of white carnations and challenged the world to look the globalization of indifference in the eye. Politicians scoffed. Camera crews broadcast a pontiff standing literally at the edge of a continent. Then came 2020. A virus invisible to the naked eye sealed churches, canceled Easter Mass, and froze the most visitor-packed square on Earth. On March 27th, the Pope hobbled alone across rain-glazed cobblestones, his white cassock whipping in a chill wind. He raised the monstrance to an empty piazza, while millions watched through phone glass. Some dismissed it as theater. Many called it the only moment of communal courage they'd felt that year. At the height of isolation, a single old man breathed through one scarred lung and told the planet, "We are not on separate boats, but all in the same storm." Inside that same year, internal war flared hot. 4 conservative cardinals submitted dubia, formal doubts about Francis's call to welcome remarried couples to communion. Blogs branded him a heretic. Political pundits on 3 continents claimed the Jesuit was a Marxist plant. When Francis casually answered a reporter, "Who am I to judge?" regarding gay Catholics, the outrage machine shifted into 4th gear. Yet he kept repeating the same words. Misericordia, mercy, synodalidad walking together. Each repetition sliced deeper into old ecclesial armor, but the strongest opponent was biological. Francis's health saga began long before white smoke. At 21, he nearly suffocated from a pulmonary infection, so vicious surgeons removed part of his right lung. He spent days gasping through rubber tubes, praying not for relief but for purpose. That brush with mortality fused into his DNA. He later joked that he ran on 1.5 cylinders. For decades, he seemed indefatigable, riding city buses and climbing favela staircases that left younger priests winded. The cracks widened after age 80. Sciatica stabbed through his hip, cartilage shredded in one knee until he needed a wheelchair. In 2023, surgeons removed intestinal scar tissue. By early 2025, aides noticed he could work only 4 hours before fatigue fogged his eyes. Still, he insisted on greeting pilgrims, clasping their hands until security had to pry him loose. The end came quietly. At 5:47 a.m. on April 21st, a nun found him collapsed beside a stack of synod dossiers. Gemelli Hospital's cardio ward pumped oxygen, but the motor that had outrun dictators, bureaucrats, and pandemics simply quit. At 9:12 a.m., monitors flatlined. Rumors flooded social media faster than press releases. Was the coffee poisoned? Did enemy prelates withhold meds? One fringe blog claimed a Chinese deep state cyber attack on his pacemaker. Doctors, meanwhile, filed a mundane report. Massive stroke, complications from chronic respiratory strain. Mundane, but final all the same. The fisherman's ring would soon be split with a silver hammer signaling sede vacante, the seat is vacant. And in the prophecy chat rooms, another kind of hammer blow landed. 112 is complete. Within 10 days, Rome bristled with cardinals in scarlet fascia. Of 138 electors, 110 owed their red hats to Francis, yet many of those protégés had grown uneasy with his relentless push for synodality. They feared a future where centralized authority melted into continental councils, where women might one day preach at Mass, where confessionals swapped judgment for accompaniment. In whispered corners, they plotted a balancing act: elect someone who could restore confidence without looking like a rollback. 3 names dominated every colonnade conversation: Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Vatican Secretary of State, subtle as chess, Roman by ordination, Veneto by birth, diplomat by instinct. His baptismal name, Peter, Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, nicknamed the Bicycle Archbishop, veteran of peace talks in Mozambique and Ukraine. A pastor who quotes Dante and rides city buses incognito. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, Filipino storyteller with the emotional intelligence of a Broadway lead, speaks fluent Tagalog, English, Italian, and tears. Prophecy hawks latched onto Parolin, a literal Peter whose career unfolded within Vatican walls, Rome enough to set chills crawling. Progressive Catholics favored Tagle as the global South's voice. Conservatives eyed an Italian as the safest lifeboat. Betting apps crashed twice under the traffic. The Sistine doors shut. Cell phones were dropped into Faraday boxes. Ballots were passed beneath frescoes of cosmic judgment. Black smoke on day 1. Black again on day 2. By day 3, pilgrims began night-long vigils. Some praying, some live-streaming, some holding placards. No false prophet. And then, white smoke. The city erupted, but the name would not be known until the scarlet trim curtain parted. Rome is both eternal and perpetually endangered. Visigoths, Black Plague, Napoleon's cannon, fascist rallies, COVID lockdowns. Each era has predicted its ruin. Yet Malachy's line, "The city of 7 hills will fall," feels tailored to modern anxieties. Geologists warn that climate-fueled flash floods already erode ancient foundations. Demographers note weekly mass attendance in Italy has halved in 25 years. Tourism props up basilicas now emptier of locals than at any point since Nero fiddled. But fall might be spiritual rather than seismic. What if the prophecy envisions a church bled of moral authority by scandal, a Rome reduced to Instagram backdrops, while belief migrates to house churches in Lagos and São Paulo? Some theologians argue the collapse is underway. Vocations plummet, confession lines vanish, and TikTok gurus answer questions priests once fielded. The apocalypse in this reading isn't a mushroom cloud, it's a long sigh of irrelevance. Yet footage loops of John's revelation, a city in purple and scarlet drunk on the blood of martyrs, destroyed in 1 hour as kings watch smoke rise. Doomsday channels splice drone shots of Vatican domes with CGI firestorms. Each video racks 1 million views because fear is viral and ad revenue doesn't question exegesis. The prophecy becomes the product, and every click thickens the plot. Scholars of Renaissance forgery point to linguistic quirks. Malachy's early mottos echo 16th century rhetoric, not medieval syntax. They argue that Benedictine editor Arnold Wyon concocted the list to sway the 1590 vote toward Cardinal Girolamo Simoncelli, whose coat of arms featured a tower, echoed by the motto, "From the Tower." Simoncelli lost, the forgery theory survived. Yet the hits kept coming. Flower of Flowers, Paul VI, adopted a fleur-de-lis on his shield. Moon Half, John Paul I, spanned half a lunar month. Glory of the Olive, Benedict XV, evoked both peace and the green-robed Olivetans. Skeptics call these stretches. Believers see them as breadcrumbs scattered through time, a cosmic wink to anyone paying attention. Statistics does little to settle the quarrel. Even a 1 in a million string of coincidences means little when the universe rolls dice trillions of times. But skeptics and mystics miss a subtler power at work: self-fulfilling influence. Popes have quietly pondered the list. Some likely picked names to dodge its implications. Others may have leaned into them. The prophecy shapes reality the moment people start acting differently because it exists. And now, with social media turbocharging every rumor, Malachy's mottos might steer more minds than any encyclical. Let's hold two possibilities side by side. First, Malachy was a forgery, his Peter the Roman a Renaissance prank that spiraled into legend. If so, Rome tomorrow morning will look much like it did yesterday. Espresso steam curling from Trastevere cafes, nuns haggling at produce stalls, pilgrims feeding digital breadcrumbs to pigeons by the obelisk. Faith will keep bumbling forward, messy and magnificent as ever. Second, the prophecy is genuine, or at least providentially accurate, and Francis was indeed the final link. That doesn't guarantee fire from heaven. Biblical judgment often arrives. In subtler attire, institutions crumble, certainties evaporate, consciences are shaken awake. A church stripped of worldly power might finally resemble the barefoot carpenter it claims to follow. Destruction can be demolition or renovation. Francis himself hinted as much. He bragged of no grand strategy, only mercy. He swapped red carpets for refugee camps, Latin decrees for kitchen table listening sessions. If Rome's walls must fall, he seemed to say, let them fall outward, so the excluded can finally step inside. That vision terrified gatekeepers, thrilled dreamers, and may yet outlive marble facades. So where does that leave you? On the brink of a story still wet with ink. Whether the next pontiff is a shepherd or a wolf, whether Malachy was oracle or opportunist, the call remains the same one Francis whispered on that rain-lashed night in 2020. Do not be afraid. Catastrophe is the oldest currency of faith, but so is courage. The real apocalypse isn't when the sky cracks, it's when fear paralyzes love. If this deep dive into prophecy, power, and possibility sparked your curiosity, tap like, smash subscribe, and share this with a friend who loves a mystery at midnight. Because the Sistine Chimney may have finished smoking, but the fate of the 7 hills, and of every soul who walks them, has only just begun. Stay tuned. The next chapter is already crowding the horizon.